I'll just use rice water.
A Mafia boss watched a single mother return baby formula at a convenience store. "I'll just use rice water," she whispered to the cashier, hands shaking as she clutched her crying infant. What happens next would shatter his reputation, break every rule he'd lived by. But for the first time in 20 years, he didn't care about consequences. Welcome, viewers. Here's another beautiful story for you. But before we start, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's get into the story. Min Jae Kim didn't do sentiment. 20 years running Seoul's most feared syndicate had taught him that weakness got you killed. Compassion was a liability. Emotion was for civilians who didn't understand how the world really worked. But kids, that was different. He couldn't explain it. Maybe something from his own childhood. Memories he'd buried so deep they only surfaced in nightmares. Whatever the reason, children were his one blind spot. His crew knew never to involve kids in operations. Businesses that employed child labor mysteriously burned down. Human traffickers who dealt in minors simply disappeared. Nobody questioned it. You didn't question Min Jae Kim. The convenience store was one of 47 legitimate businesses he owned across the city, fronts, mostly, for laundering money. This particular location in Gangnam served a dual purpose: surveillance on a rival gang's territory and steady cash flow that looked clean on paper. Min Jae rarely visited his stores personally. That's what managers were for. But tonight, insomnia had driven him out of his penthouse at 2 a.m, and he'd ended up here, ostensibly checking inventory in the back office. Through the two-way mirror, he watched the overnight cashier process returns. That's when she walked in. Early 20s, maybe. Exhausted didn't begin to cover it. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her jacket had seen better years. She carried an infant against her chest in a worn cloth wrap, one hand supporting the baby's head with the kind of gentle protectiveness that spoke of fierce love. The other hand clutched an unopened can of baby formula. Min Jae's attention sharpened. Something about her movements, the way she hesitated at the counter, the slight tremble in her fingers, triggered every instinct he'd honed over 2 decades of reading people. She was desperate. "I need to return this," she told the cashier, her voice barely audible through the mirror's audio feed. The cashier, Juno, 23, college student working night shifts, glanced at the formula, then at her. "Do you have a receipt?" Her face fell. "I know. I paid cash earlier today. Different shift." Juno's expression softened with sympathy. Min Jae knew his employees. Good kid. Honest. Probably about to bend the rules. "Store policy requires receipts for returns," Juno said, then lowered his voice. "But I can probably make an exception. Is everything okay?" The woman's eyes glistened. She blinked rapidly, forcing back tears. "Everything's fine. I made a mistake buying this. We don't actually need it." Liar. Min Jae leaned closer to the glass. Every micro-expression, every tiny shift in her body language screamed the opposite. She needed that formula desperately. The baby in her arms couldn't have been more than 3 months old. "Are you sure?" Juno pressed gently. "Because if you need." "I'm sure." Her voice gained an edge of steel beneath the exhaustion. Pride. She had pride. "My baby will be fine with rice water. It's what my grandmother used. Traditional methods are better anyway." Rice water. Min Jae's jaw tightened. Rice water was what desperately poor families used when they couldn't afford formula and had no access to breast milk. It provided minimal nutrition. Babies didn't thrive on it. They merely survived. This woman was choosing between feeding her child and having enough money for something else. Rent, probably. Or electricity. Maybe both. Juno processed the return without further questions, his own discomfort visible in the set of his shoulders. He handed over the cash, 43,001. The woman took it with shaking hands, whispered a thank you, and left quickly, as if afraid she might change her mind. Through the window, Min Jae watched her pause on the sidewalk outside. Her shoulders shook. Silent sobs. She pressed her face against the baby's head, her whole body curving protectively around the infant even as she fell apart. Then she straightened, wiped her face roughly with her sleeve, and walked away into the Seoul night. Min-jae stood motionless in the office for 3 full minutes. He'd seen terrible things, done terrible things. Violence and cruelty were the language of his world. He'd watched people die and felt nothing. They'd understood the risks when they entered this life. But this? A mother forced to choose between her baby's nutrition and keeping a roof over their heads? That carved something raw in his chest. "Boss!" His lieutenant's voice crackled through his phone. "You need me to send a car?" Min-jae had forgotten Tae-sung was waiting outside. "Follow the woman who just left. Don't approach. Just get me an address." Silence on the other end. Then, carefully. "The one with the baby?" "Yes. What are we?" "Just the address, Tae-sung. Nothing else." 20 minutes later, Min-jae had a name and location. Emma Hart, 24, American expat, resident of a semi-basement apartment in a questionable neighborhood. Widowed 8 months ago. No family in Korea. Working 2 part-time jobs, data entry and English tutoring. The address told him everything he needed to know about her financial situation. Those semi-basement units flooded when it rained hard. Mold was standard. Most landlords rented them to people with no other options. Min-jae sat in his car outside the building, staring at the narrow window that marked her apartment, barely visible above ground level, glowing with a single dim light. He should leave. This wasn't his problem. He had an empire to run, rivals to manage, deals to close. One struggling single mother in a city of 10 million wasn't his concern. The baby would be fine. People survived on less. He started the engine, drove 3 blocks, turned around. That night, Min-jae Kim made a decision that would unravel everything he'd built and show him what actually mattered. He just didn't know it yet. Min-jae didn't do charity. That needed to be clear from the start. This wasn't about being a good person or easing his conscience. He simply couldn't stand the thought of that baby drinking rice water when the solution was absurdly simple. Money meant nothing to him. He had more than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. So why not use some of it? The next morning, he summoned Tae-sung to his office. His lieutenant arrived looking nervous. Always a smart approach when the boss called unexpected meetings. "I need you to handle something discreetly," Min-jae said, not looking up from his paperwork. Tae-sung straightened. "Of course, boss. What's the target?" "Not a target. A delivery." Min-jae slid a handwritten list across the desk. "Get these items and leave them at the address I'm about to give you. No contact. No note. Just leave them at the door." His lieutenant picked up the list, scanning it with growing confusion. Baby formula, diapers, rice, vegetables, eggs, chicken, fruit. He looked up. "Boss, this is a grocery list." "Obviously. For who?" Min-jae's expression didn't change. "Does it matter?" "No, sir." Tae-sung knew better than to push. "When do you need this done?" "Today. This afternoon. Make sure she's not home." He wrote Emma's address on a separate piece of paper. "And Tae-sung? This stays between us." "Understood." Tae-sung left, still looking puzzled but asking no further questions. That's why Min-jae kept him around. The man understood discretion. What Min-jae didn't understand was how spectacularly Tae-sung would misinterpret groceries. Emma found the boxes when she returned from her morning tutoring session. 4 large boxes, neatly stacked beside her door. Her first instinct was suspicion. Nobody left gifts in this neighborhood without an agenda. Carefully, she nudged one open with her foot. Groceries. Baby formula. Diapers. Her breath caught. She glanced around the empty corridor, half expecting someone to jump out. When nothing happened, she quickly dragged the boxes inside, heart hammering. Who would do this? She'd been in Korea for 3 years, married for 2 of them before Daniel died. His friends had scattered after the funeral. Turns out they were his associates, not friends. Her own family back in Chicago had cut her off when she married against their wishes. She had nobody. Emma unpacked the boxes with shaking hands, taking inventory. Formula. The good kind, the brand she couldn't afford. Diapers in the right size. Fresh vegetables. Rice. Chicken breast. Eggs. Fruit. Everything a struggling mother needed. Then she reached the bottom of the 4th box. Caviar. Imported Russian caviar in a small glass jar. She stared at it, completely baffled. Next to it sat a bottle of champagne, expensive champagne, judging by the label she couldn't read. What kind of care package included caviar and champagne? Emma turned the jar over in her hands, searching for some clue about her mysterious benefactor. Nothing. No note, no card, no explanation. Just groceries and luxury items that made absolutely no sense together. You included what? Min-jae's voice dropped to that dangerous quiet that made grown men reconsider their life choices. Taesung shifted uncomfortably in front of the desk. I thought you said groceries for someone important. I assumed you wanted to impress. Impress who? A struggling single mother who returned baby formula because she couldn't afford it. I didn't know the context. Taesung's voice pitched higher. You just gave me an address and said handle it discreetly. When you do that, it usually means someone significant. A politician, maybe, or a business partner. So I added some premium items. To show respect. Min-jae pinched the bridge of his nose. 20 years. 20 years he'd worked with this man. Caviar shows respect? In certain circles, yes. She needed baby formula, Taesung. Formula. Not beluga caviar and champagne that costs more than her monthly rent. Realization dawned on his lieutenant's face. Oh no. Boss, I thought. Don't think. Just fix it. Min-jae waved him away. Next delivery, stick to the list exactly. Nothing else. Can you manage that? Yes, sir. Absolutely. Just the list. Taesung hesitated at the door. Should I retrieve the caviar? And look like a lunatic breaking into her apartment? No. The damage is done. After Taesung left, Min-jae allowed himself a rare moment of frustration. This was supposed to be simple. Anonymous help for someone who needed it. Instead, his incompetent lieutenant had turned it into some bizarre luxury gift basket. Now she'd be confused. Suspicious, probably. Smart women didn't trust random expensive gifts appearing at their doors. He should have handled it himself. The deliveries continued over the next 2 weeks. Each time Emma came home, another box waited by her door. Each time, the contents were perfect. Exactly what she needed, as if someone had created a detailed inventory of her life. Formula. Always formula, and always the right amount for the week. Fresh produce. Proteins. Staples. Everything to keep her and the baby healthy. And then the weird additions. A jar of truffle oil. A small container of saffron. Once, inexplicably, a box of Belgian chocolates that cost more than she made in a week of tutoring. Emma started keeping a list of the bizarre luxury items, trying to identify a pattern. There wasn't one. Whoever was helping her clearly had money, but absolutely no sense of what normal people needed. Or maybe they were testing her, seeing if she'd sell the expensive items? She tried everything to catch her mysterious benefactor, changed her schedule randomly, waited in the corridor for hours, set up her phone to record the door. Nothing worked. The boxes appeared like magic, always when she was gone. After the 3rd week, Emma made a decision. She couldn't keep accepting anonymous charity, especially from someone who included champagne and caviar alongside baby formula. That wasn't normal help. That was something else. Something potentially dangerous. She'd lived in her late husband's world long enough to recognize when something felt wrong. Daniel had taught her, unintentionally, how to spot the patterns of criminal enterprise. The expensive suits hiding violence. The generous gifts that came with invisible strings. This felt like that. Whoever was leaving these boxes had money, resources, and the ability to track her movements with precision. In Korea's underworld, that combination pointed to one type of person. Organized crime. Emma kissed her sleeping baby's forehead, stealing her resolve. Tomorrow, she'd figure out who was behind this. And tomorrow, she'd put a stop to it, before whatever debt she was incurring came due. She had no idea she was about to walk straight into Min-jae's carefully constructed life and blow it apart. Min-jae's consulting firm occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower in Gangnam. Legitimate on paper, profitable even, they actually did provide business consulting services. It just happened that most of their clients needed advice on things like territorial disputes, protection arrangements, and competitive elimination. The reception area looked like any other corporate office. Sleek minimalist furniture. Expensive art on the walls. a pretty receptionist who smiled at clients while the panic button sat within easy reach under her desk. Min Jae was reviewing quarterly reports when his receptionist's voice came through the intercom, tension evident beneath her professional tone. "Sir, there's a woman here demanding to see you about a stalking incident. She's quite insistent." He glanced at his schedule. "No appointments for another hour. Tell her to file a police report. We don't handle. She says the stalker has been leaving gifts at her door for 3 weeks, and she traced one of the delivery men to this building." Every muscle in Min Jae's body went rigid. "No, sir." He closed his eyes briefly. "Tae-sung, that incompetent, clumsy fool must have been spotted. Send her in." 30 seconds later, Emma Hart walked into his office carrying her baby and an expression that could cut steel. Min Jae's carefully cultivated composure nearly cracked. The security footage from the convenience store hadn't done her justice. Even exhausted and angry, she was striking. Not in the polished way of the women who usually orbited his world, but with a raw authenticity that made something in his chest tighten uncomfortably. She closed the door behind her, assessing him with sharp eyes that missed nothing. The expensive suit, the traditional Korean painting worth more than a car. The way he sat with the absolute stillness of someone accustomed to power. "You run a security consulting firm," she said. It wasn't a question. Among other things, Min Jae kept his voice neutral, professional. "Please sit." "I'll stand." She shifted the baby, a boy Min Jae noted, maybe 4 months old now, to her other hip. "Someone's been leaving packages at my door. Groceries, baby supplies, and random luxury items. It's been 3 weeks. I finally caught one of the delivery guys yesterday and followed him. He came here." Min Jae's mind raced. She'd followed one of his men? Bold. Reckless but bold. Perhaps he works for multiple companies. Delivery services often don't. Her voice sharpened. "I've lived in Seoul long enough to recognize a cover story. Your receptionist nearly had a heart attack when I mentioned tracking someone here. This is not a normal business, and whoever's been leaving those boxes has resources. Money. Organization." She stepped closer to his desk, and Min Jae caught himself leaning back slightly, a defensive reflex he hadn't experienced in years. "So here's what's going to happen," Emma continued. "You're going to tell me who hired your firm to track me, and I'm going to make it very clear that I don't want their help. No more boxes. No more gifts. I didn't ask for charity, and I don't need a benefactor, especially not one who includes caviar with baby formula like some kind of deranged Santa Claus." The caviar comment almost made him smile. "Almost. Miss Hart. Emma Hart. Miss Hart, I'm not sure what you think this company does, but I know exactly what this company does." Her eyes held his with unsettling intensity. "My late husband worked in your world. Different organization, but same business. I recognize the setup. So please don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is a legitimate consulting firm." Min Jae's estimation of her rose considerably, and simultaneously, his situation became infinitely more complicated. She knew, not everything clearly, but enough to be dangerous to herself. He should have her escorted out. Should deny everything and make sure she never came back. Should absolutely not do what he was about to do. "You're right," he said quietly. Emma blinked, clearly expecting more denial. What? You're right. This isn't entirely legitimate. And yes, someone did hire us to track you." The lies formed smoothly, naturally. 20 years of deception made it easy. "But not for the reasons you think." "Then what reasons?" Min Jae stood, moving around his desk slowly, non-threatening, open body language. "Have you heard of corporate social responsibility programs? Many companies, even unconventional ones, maintain funds for community support, helping families in need. It's good for business, good for neighborhood relations." That's the worst cover story I've ever heard. It's also true. He was improvising now, building the lie as he spoke. "One of our clients noticed your situation at a store they own. They asked us to facilitate discreet assistance. We specialize in situations requiring confidentiality." Emma's expression remained skeptical. "And the caviar?" "Miscommunication with our procurement department. They're used to different types of clients." "So you're telling me this is just corporate charity?" Someone saw me struggling and decided to help out of the goodness of their heart. Essentially, yes. In the middle of the night. With no note, no explanation, no request for anything in return. That's what makes it charity rather than investment. They stared at each other across 3 feet of expensive carpet. Min Jae could see her mind working, weighing his explanation against her instincts. I don't believe you, she said finally. That's your prerogative. But I also don't have proof you're lying. Her shoulders sagged slightly, exhaustion breaking through the anger. The baby stirred against her chest, making small sounds. Look, I appreciate the help. I really do. But I can't keep accepting gifts from strangers. It feels wrong. And if there is some agenda I'm not seeing, I need to protect my son. Your son. Not the baby. Your son. The possessiveness in her tone, the way she unconsciously held him tighter. Min Jae filed away those details for later analysis. What if the gifts came with transparency? The words left his mouth before his brain could stop them. What if, instead of anonymous deliveries, someone checked in personally? Made sure you actually needed the assistance? Would that be more acceptable? Emma frowned. What do you mean? What was he doing? This was spiraling completely out of control. But he couldn't seem to stop himself. I mean, Min Jae said carefully, what if I personally oversaw your case? As a social worker of sorts. Regular check-ins, needs assessment, that sort of thing. You'd know exactly who was helping and why. Complete transparency. The lie expanded, taking shape. He could make this work. A cover identity. Regular visits under the guise of social services. It would let him ensure she and the baby were okay, while maintaining enough distance to protect them both from his actual life. You're a social worker, Emma said flatly. Undercover social worker. We operate in communities where traditional services aren't trusted, which is why this firm exists. It gives us cover to help people who might not accept help otherwise. It was the most ridiculous story he'd ever concocted. Absolutely no one would believe it. Emma studied him for a long moment. Her eyes moved from his expensive watch to his tailored suit to the office that screamed wealth and power. Fine, she said. Min Jae blinked. Fine. You can do home visits. But you follow my rules. You call first. You don't just show up. And the second I feel uncomfortable, this arrangement ends. Understood. He should say no. Should tell her the program was full, or the funding was cut, or literally any other excuse. Understood, he heard himself say instead. Emma pulled out her phone. Give me your number. Min Jae recited his personal cell number. Something he never gave to anyone outside his inner circle. And watched her save it. I work afternoons Tuesday through Thursday, she told him. Mornings are better for visits. And Mr. Kim. Min Jae Kim. Mr. Kim. She headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth. You seem like a terrible social worker. But my son needs formula more than I need pride. So I'll accept your help. Just don't make me regret this. She left before he could respond. Min Jae stood alone in his office, staring at the closed door, and wondered what the hell he'd just done. Behind him, the door to his private conference room opened. Tae-sung emerged, having listened to the entire conversation. Boss, his lieutenant said slowly, did you just volunteer to pretend to be a social worker? Min Jae returned to his desk without answering. A social worker, Tae-sung repeated, something like awe in his voice. You, the man who runs half of Seoul's underworld, are going to make house calls to a single mother and pretend to assess her needs. Get out, Tae-sung. This is the best thing that's ever happened in my entire life. Out. But even after his lieutenant left, cackling all the way down the hallway, Min Jae couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made either the best or worst decision of his life. Probably worst. Definitely worst. The baby's face flashed through his mind. Tiny features, completely innocent, completely dependent on his mother's ability to provide. Maybe not the worst decision after all. Min Jae had faced rival gang leaders, corrupt politicians, and federal investigators without breaking a sweat. None of them terrified him quite like standing outside Emma Hart's apartment at 9 a.m, holding a clipboard he'd grabbed from his office to look more official. A clipboard. As if that would somehow sell the social worker lie. Tae-sung had spent 2 days coaching him. Stop walking like you own everything. Social workers don't have that kind of confidence. Slouch a little. Look concerned but not threatening. And for the love of God, boss, smile occasionally. You look like you're planning someone's murder. I might be planning yours if you don't shut up. Now, facing Emma's door, Min-jae wished he'd paid more attention to that coaching. He knocked, too firmly, had to be gentler, and waited. Emma opened the door with the baby on her hip, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater that had seen better days. No makeup, hair in a messy bun. She looked young and exhausted and beautiful in a way that made his chest tighten uncomfortably. Mr. Kim. Punctual. She stepped aside. Come in, I guess. The apartment was exactly what he'd expected. Tiny, dim, showing signs of barely controlled chaos. Baby items occupied every available surface. A laptop sat open on a folded table that served as her workspace. The walls showed water damage that the landlord had clearly never addressed. But it was clean, organized despite the clutter. She'd made a home here with almost nothing. Tea, Emma offered, moving toward a small electric kettle. Thank you. Min-jae stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, suddenly aware of how much space his body occupied in the cramped quarters. He'd been in crack houses and illegal gambling dens that felt less intimate than this. She handed him a chipped mug, then settled on the worn couch with the baby. So how does this work? You assess my situation and determine if I qualify for continued assistance. Something like that. Min-jae sat in the only chair, his knees almost touching the coffee table. Everything in this apartment forced proximity. Tell me about your circumstances. Employment, income, expenses. Emma ran through the details matter-of-factly. 2 part-time jobs, neither with benefits. Tutoring paid better, but was inconsistent. Students canceled frequently. Data entry was steady, but barely covered rent. Her visa was dependent on maintaining employment. Childcare was impossible to afford, so she worked while the baby slept or brought him to tutoring sessions with understanding clients. What about family support? Min-jae asked, taking notes he didn't need on his ridiculous clipboard. None. Her voice flattened. My parents disowned me when I married Daniel. His family is in the States and never approved of me. I'm on my own. Daniel was your husband? Was. He died 8 months ago. She adjusted the baby's position, not meeting Min-jae's eyes. Car accident. Very sudden. Except Min-jae had pulled Daniel Hart's file. There was no car accident. The man had been executed by his own gang for skimming money, shot twice in the head and dumped in the Han River. Police ruled it death by misadventure when the body washed up 2 weeks later. Emma had lied to someone about how her husband died. The question was who she was protecting and what she actually knew. I'm sorry for your loss, Min-jae said quietly. Are you? She looked at him then, something sharp and assessing in her gaze. You don't seem like the type who does sympathy well. I'm not. The honesty slipped out before he could stop it. But I am sorry that you're raising a child alone in a foreign country with no support system. Emma's expression softened slightly. See, that almost sounded genuine. You might actually make a convincing social worker with practice. I'll work on it. The baby started fussing. Emma stood, bouncing him gently, and Min-jae watched the practiced ease of her movements. Every gesture spoke of deep care despite obvious exhaustion. Can I ask you something? Emma said suddenly. And I want a real answer, not whatever official line you're supposed to give. All right. Why are you really doing this? Not the company. You specifically. You could have sent anyone to do these visits. But you volunteered. Why? Min-jae set down his clipboard, buying time. The truth was impossible. A version of it, though. I don't like seeing children suffer for their parents' circumstances, he said carefully. It's not the baby's fault you're struggling. He didn't ask to be born into this situation. He deserves better. Everyone struggles. Why single us out? Because I happened to be there when you returned that formula. The truth again, slipping through his defenses. And I couldn't stop thinking about rice water. Emma's breath caught. She stared at him with sudden understanding. That was your store. You were there. Too late. Min-jae realized his mistake. A social worker employed by a corporate charity program wouldn't have been personally present. I was conducting an inspection. You saw me. She sat back down heavily. You saw me at my lowest moment, and you decided to what? Fix it. I decided to help. There's a difference. Is there? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. God, this is humiliating. You witnessed me returning baby formula, and now you're in my apartment evaluating how poor I am. That's not. What's next? You'll check if my cabinets meet minimum standards? Inspect the water damage? Judge whether I'm a good enough mother to deserve your charity. The baby, sensing his mother's distress, began crying. Emma stood again, pacing the small space, trying to soothe him while her own composure cracked. Min-jae watched the spiral, recognizing shame when he saw it. He'd felt it himself, once, long ago. The acidic burn of accepting help you desperately needed but couldn't bear to take. I'm leaving now, he said quietly, standing. Emma stopped pacing. What? This was a mistake. Not the help. You need it, and I'm not stopping the deliveries. But these visits are making you uncomfortable. I can see that. So I'll leave. He moved toward the door. The groceries will keep coming. No strings, no inspections, no judgment. You don't have to see me again. Wait. Emma shifted the crying baby, frustration and confusion warring on her face. You're just going to keep helping with nothing in return? Yes. Why? Min-jae's hand rested on the doorknob. He could leave now. Should leave. Let Tae-sung handle future deliveries. Maintain distance. Forget the way she looked at him with those sharp, searching eyes. Because 23 years ago, I was 6 years old and starving, he heard himself say. My mother was gone. My father drank everything we had. A stranger left food at our door every week for months. I never knew who. They saved my life. The confession hung in the air between them. Min-jae had never told anyone that story. Not Tae-sung, not his closest advisors, not anyone in his organization. Why was he telling her? Now I'm the stranger, he continued, and you're the person who needs help. That's all this is. Someone who can help, helping someone who needs it. No debt, no obligation, no judgment. Emma's eyes glistened. The baby had quieted, sensing the shift in atmosphere. I'm sorry, she said softly. I didn't mean to imply. You meant exactly what you said, and you weren't wrong. This situation is unequal and uncomfortable. But the alternative is you struggling needlessly when I have resources sitting idle. Min-jae opened the door. Think about it. If you want the help to continue, text me. If not, I'll understand. He left before she could respond, taking the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator. His heart hammered, actual nervousness, an emotion he'd thought he'd killed years ago. That story about his childhood. Why had he told her that? It was true, every word, but it was also ammunition. Information about his past that could be weaponized. He'd just handed vulnerability to a woman he barely knew. Tae-sung was waiting in the car outside. How did it go, boss? Terribly. Did you blow the cover? Probably. His lieutenant pulled into traffic. Want me to assign someone else to handle? No. The word came out sharper than intended. I'll handle it. Boss. She's smart, Tae-sung. Too smart. She's going to figure out eventually that I'm not a social worker. But until she does, Min-jae stared out the window at Seoul's endless sprawl. Until she does, I'm going to make sure she and that baby have everything they need. Even if it means lying to her? Especially if it means lying to her. The truth about what I actually do. That would send her running. And then who helps her? Tae-sung said nothing for several blocks. Then, quietly, you like her. Don't be ridiculous. Boss, in 20 years, I've never seen you share personal information with anyone. You just told a stranger about your childhood. To establish credibility for the cover story. Right. Credibility. That's definitely why you look like you'd been kicked in the chest when you got back to the car. Min-jae's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Okay, you can keep helping, but I'm paying you back someday. I don't care how long it takes. Emma. He stared at the message, something warm and unfamiliar blooming in his chest. We're going to need a better strategy, he told Tae-sung. This social worker cover won't hold up under scrutiny. What did you have in mind? Min-jae didn't answer. He was too busy typing a response, deleting it, typing again, acting like a teenager instead of a crime boss. No payback necessary. Just take care of your son. That's enough. Her response came seconds later. His name is Lucas. And nothing is ever free, Mr. Kim. But thank you anyway. Lucas. The baby had a name now. Somehow that made everything more real, more complicated, more dangerous. And Min-jae couldn't bring himself to care about any of it. The home visits became routine over the next 6 weeks. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, Min-jae appeared at Emma's door with his clipboard and his increasingly convincing social worker persona. They'd talk about Lucas's development, Emma's job situation, her needs for the coming week. Somewhere along the way, they'd started talking about other things too. Books, music, the absurdity of Korean game shows. How Emma had ended up in Seoul in the first place. Teaching English, met Daniel at a language exchange, fell fast and hard. She edited the story, of course. Min-jae could see the careful omissions, the places where she steered around dangerous truths. He did the same. His childhood in Busan became a sanitized version. Poverty without violence, struggle without the criminal enterprise that eventually saved him. They traded curated histories like poker players, showing carefully selected cards. And despite the lies, or maybe because of them, something grew between them. "You're smiling," Taesung observed one Tuesday afternoon when Min-jae returned to the office. "At your phone, like a human person." "I don't smile." "You just did. You smiled at a text message." "From her, I'm assuming." Min-jae pocketed his phone without responding. Emma had sent a photo of Lucas trying solid food for the first time. His face scrunched in adorable disgust at the taste of mashed sweet potato. "This is getting complicated, boss." "It's under control." "Is it?" Taesung leaned against the desk. "Because from where I'm standing, you're spending 8 hours a week with this woman. You check your phone constantly. Yesterday you canceled a meeting with the Busan faction because it conflicted with your home visit schedule. The Busan meeting wasn't urgent. Everything with Busan is urgent. They've been pushing territorial boundaries for 3 months. Min-jae waved dismissively. "Let them push. We'll address it when necessary." Taesung stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "Who are you and what have you done with my boss?" "Don't be dramatic." "Dramatic? You just deprioritized a potential gang war because you didn't want to miss breakfast with a woman who thinks you're a social worker. That's not dramatic, that's insane." Before Min-jae could respond, his phone rang. The office line, which meant business. He answered, listening to his casino manager explain that they had a situation requiring immediate attention. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. He hung up, already reaching for his jacket. "See?" Taesung gestured broadly. "This is what I mean. You drop everything for the business, but schedule around her. You see the problem, right?" Min-jae did see the problem. He just didn't want to acknowledge it. Because acknowledging it meant admitting that Emma Hart had become more important to him than she should be. That her laugh made his chest feel strange. That holding Lucas during their last visit, Emma had handed him over while she took a phone call, had awakened something he'd thought dead. That he was falling for a woman who didn't actually know him at all. "Handle the Busan situation," Min-jae told his lieutenant. "Set up a meeting for next week. I'll deal with them personally. And if they won't wait, then remind them why they should." Emma knew something was wrong with Min-jae's story. She'd known from the first visit, actually. No social worker wore suits that expensive or moved with that kind of controlled power. No corporate charity program operated with this level of secrecy and efficiency. And no legitimate organization would send the same person for weekly home visits when a simple case manager would suffice. But she'd let it slide because Lucas needed the help. Because the groceries kept coming. No more random luxury items, just exactly what they needed. Because Min-jae was careful and respectful and never made her feel judged. Also because she was starting to look forward to his visits more than she should. That was dangerous. Emma had learned the hard way what happened when you trusted the wrong people. Daniel had seemed safe too, at first, charming and protective and completely in love with her. She hadn't realized she was marrying into a criminal family until 6 months after the wedding. By then it was too late. The things she'd seen, the conversations she'd overheard, the violence she'd witnessed. It bound her to that world whether she wanted to be there or not. When Daniel died, she should have felt grief. Instead, she'd felt relief. And guilt over that relief, which somehow felt worse than mourning. Lucas stirred in his crib. 6 months old now, growing fast on the good nutrition Min-jae's program provided. Emma lifted him, breathing in his baby smell, reminding herself why she'd made the choices she did. This child wasn't supposed to exist. Daniel's associates had planned to sell him. His biological parents owed a debt they couldn't pay. Emma had found out by accident, overhearing a conversation she wasn't meant to hear. She'd taken Lucas and run, walked straight out of that life with a 3-week-old infant and never looked back. Daniel had died 3 days later. Emma suspected it wasn't coincidence, that his bosses had realized she knew too much, taken her husband as punishment or warning. She'd been prepared to run further, to disappear completely. But then nothing happened. No one came looking. Daniel's gang had simply written them both off, apparently deciding a widow and baby weren't worth the trouble. So Emma stayed in Seoul, kept her head down, and tried to build something resembling a normal life. Until Min-jae Kim walked into it. Her phone buzzed. A text from him. Emergency situation at work. Need to cancel Thursday's visit. Sorry for short notice. Emma stared at the message. In 6 weeks, he'd never canceled. Never been late, never rescheduled, never missed a visit. What kind of emergency did social workers have? Before she could overthink it, she typed back. Is everything okay? The response took 5 minutes. Yes. Just busy. We'll explain Thursday. Except there was no Thursday visit. He'd just canceled it. Emma's instincts, honed by 2 years in Daniel's world, started screaming. Something was wrong. Either Min-jae was in trouble, or he was lying about more than just being a social worker. Probably both. She should leave it alone. Should accept the help, ask no questions, protect Lucas and herself by staying ignorant. That was the smart play. Emma had never been good at making smart plays. The emergency at the casino turned out to be a rival gang making a very public, very stupid territorial challenge. They'd sent 6 men to cause trouble, intimidate customers, make it clear they didn't respect Min-jae's claim to this part of Gangnam. Min-jae handled it the way he handled all challenges. Swiftly, decisively, and with enough violence to ensure it wouldn't happen again. By the time he left, 2 of the 6 men required hospitalization. The other 4 would think very carefully before showing their faces in his territory again. Boss, you've got blood on your shirt, Tae-sung said as they walked to the car. Min-jae looked down. His lieutenant was right, splatter across the collar, probably from when he'd broken someone's nose. I have a spare in the office. You also have a text from Emma. Came through 15 minutes ago. Everything in Min-jae went still. He'd silenced his phone for the confrontation. What does it say? Didn't read it, boss. That's your personal business. Min-jae pulled out his phone. I know you're not really a social worker. I've known since the first visit. But I appreciated the help anyway, and I thought maybe you had good reasons for the cover story. If you're in some kind of trouble, though, I need to know. Lucas, and I can't afford to get caught up in something dangerous. Please be honest with me. His blood ran cold. She knew. Of course she knew. He'd been an idiot to think the lie would hold. Worse, she was worried about him. About getting caught up in danger. The irony was suffocating. Emma and Lucas were already caught up. They just didn't realize it yet. By accepting his help, by letting him into their lives, they'd become associated with him in the eyes of anyone watching. And people were always watching. We have a problem, Min-jae told Tae-sung. The Busan faction? Emma. She figured out the cover story. His lieutenant whistled low. What are you going to tell her? That was the question, wasn't it? The truth would send her running. Assuming she didn't already know enough about the underworld to recognize his name. A better lie might buy time, but would only make things worse when she inevitably discovered it. Or he could do what he should have done from the start. Walk away, end the visits, keep the groceries coming anonymously, and protect her by staying the hell out of her life. The smart choice. The safe choice. The choice that wouldn't put her and Lucas at risk. Min-jae looked at the text again. Please be honest with me. When had anyone ever asked him for honesty? In his world, people wanted lies, comfortable deceptions that let them sleep at night. Emma was asking for truth, even knowing it might hurt. He started typing. You're right. I'm not a social worker. But I'm not in trouble, and neither are you. Can we talk? In person? Her response came immediately. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. And Mr. Kim? If you're going to lie to me again, don't bother showing up. Min-jae pocketed his phone, trying to ignore the way his pulse had kicked up. Nerves. He was experiencing actual nervousness over a conversation with a woman. "What's the play, boss?" Taesung asked. "I'm going to tell her the truth." "The actual truth? About who you are and what you do." Enough of the truth to be honest without putting her in more danger than she's already in. There's no version of that truth that doesn't scare her away. Min-jae knew that, had known it from the start. But the alternative, continuing to lie to someone who'd asked him directly for honesty, felt worse than losing her. "Then I guess tomorrow she runs," he said quietly. "And I make sure she's still protected from a distance." "You really care about her?" It wasn't a question, but Min-jae answered anyway. "Yes, even though she's probably going to hate you when she finds out. Especially then, because that means she's smart enough to recognize danger and brave enough to walk away from it." Taesung shook his head slowly. 20 years I've known you, boss. Never thought I'd see you fall for someone. Certainly never thought it would be like this." Neither had Min-jae. But here he was, heading home to figure out how to explain his criminal empire to a single mother who deserved so much better than anything he could offer. Tomorrow would either be the beginning of something real or the end of something that never had a chance to start. He was genuinely unsure which outcome terrified him more. Min-jae arrived at Emma's apartment exactly at 9, rehearsed explanations dissolving the moment she opened the door. She looked tired. More than tired, braced for impact. Lucas babbled happily in his playpen, oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults. "Come in," Emma said quietly. "I made coffee. Figure we'll both need it." They sat across from each other like negotiators preparing for battle. Min-jae had faced down federal prosecutors with less anxiety than he felt right now. "Before you start," Emma said, wrapping her hands around her mug, "I need to tell you something. Because if we're doing honesty, it goes both ways." That wasn't what Min-jae expected. "All right, my husband wasn't a good man. Daniel worked for the Jade Dragons, mid-level enforcer, mostly collections and intimidation. I didn't know when I married him. Found out too late." She spoke calmly, like reciting facts that had lost their power to hurt. "He died because he stole from his own people. They executed him and dumped him in the Han River." Min-jae kept his expression neutral, even as his mind raced. She knew. She'd known all along about Daniel's real death. "Lucas isn't mine biologically," Emma continued. "His parents owed money to the dragons. Couldn't pay. The gang was going to sell him. Infant trafficking, because apparently humans aren't enough, they traffic babies too. I found out by accident. Took him and left." She met Min-jae's eyes directly. "I've lived in your world, Mr. Kim. I know what it looks like. I know how people move, how they talk, how they operate. So when a man in a $10,000 suit shows up claiming to be an undercover social worker, I recognized exactly what kind of cover story that was." The silence stretched. Lucas banged a toy against his playpen, the only sound in the apartment. "Why didn't you say something?" Min-jae asked finally. "Because Lucas needed formula more than I needed answers. Because whoever you are, whatever you do, you've been nothing but kind to us. And because," she paused, vulnerability flickering across her face, "because I wanted to believe maybe you were different. That maybe not everyone in that world is. A monster. I was going to say beyond redemption, but sure, monster works too." Min-jae set down his coffee, choosing his words carefully. "My name is Min-jae Kim. That part's true. I run what people call a crime syndicate. Protection, gambling, some legitimate businesses mixed in. I've done things I'm not proud of. Hurt people who probably deserved it, and some who didn't. I'm not a good man, Emma. I'm not even sure I'm a redeemable one. Then why help us? Because I saw you return baby formula and say you'd use rice water instead." The words came easier now, truth flowing like a broken dam. "And I have this one stupid weakness. Kids. Can't explain it, can't rationalize it, but I can't stand seeing children suffer. So I decided to help. Anonymously at first. Then you tracked my idiot lieutenant to my office, and I panicked." Emma laughed, actual laughter, sharp and surprised. "You panicked. Completely. Made up that ridiculous social worker story on the spot. Thought it would buy me time to figure out a better approach. It was a terrible story. I know. The clipboard was a nice touch, though. Very committed to the bit." Taesung insisted on the clipboard. They stared at each other, and something shifted. The tension didn't disappear, but it transformed into something else. Understanding, maybe. Shared recognition of two people who'd both lived in shadows and learned to navigate darkness. I should run, Emma said softly. Take Lucas and disappear. That's the smart choice. Get away from you before whatever enemies you have decided were leverage. You should, Min-jae agreed. It would be safer. But you'd make sure we were protected anyway, wouldn't you? Even if I never spoke to you again. Yes. Why? Because he'd fallen for her. Because Lucas's laugh made him think about the life he might have had if he'd made different choices. Because for the first time in 20 years, he wanted something beyond power and control. He wanted connection, authenticity, someone who saw past the monster to whatever humanity remained underneath. Because you deserve better than what this city has given you, he said instead. You and Lucas both. And if I can provide that, even from a distance, then maybe I'm not completely irredeemable after all. Emma's eyes shimmered. That's either the sweetest or most manipulative thing anyone's ever said to me, and I genuinely can't tell which. Probably both. I'm not good at this. At what? Being honest. Caring about someone. Any of it. Min-jae gestured helplessly. I know how to run an empire. I know how to hurt people who threaten me. I don't know how to sit in a cramped apartment drinking coffee with a woman He stopped, the words catching. A woman you what? Emma prompted gently. A woman I have no business caring about, but can't seem to stop thinking about anyway. The confession hung between them. Lucas chose that moment to demand attention, his babbling turning insistent. Emma lifted him, settling him on her hip with practiced ease. I knew who you were, she said quietly. Not your name specifically, but what you were. And I let you keep coming anyway. I looked forward to your visits. Started checking my phone constantly in case you texted. Lucas lights up when you walk in. Did you notice that? Min-jae had noticed. Had catalogued every smile, every reaching gesture, every sign that the baby recognized and trusted him. So here's what I think, Emma continued. I think we're both damaged people who've done questionable things to survive. I think you're more than your worst actions, and I'm more than my mistakes. And I think, she took a breath, I think I'm falling for you too, which is possibly the stupidest thing I've ever admitted out loud. Min-jae's heart did something complicated and painful. Emma, but I need you to understand something. Her voice gained steel. I won't let Lucas grow up in that world. I pulled him out of it once, and I'll die before I let him get pulled back in. So if you want, whatever this is, you need to figure out how to give him a different life. A safe life. Can you do that? Could he? Walking away from the empire he'd built, the power structure that had defined him for 2 decades? It should have been impossible. Should have felt like tearing out his own spine. Instead, it felt like relief. I can, Min-jae said. I don't know how yet, but I'll figure it out. For you. For Lucas. For whatever chance we might have at something real. You'd leave all that behind? The power, the money, the control. I'd leave anything behind if it meant I got to keep coming to these visits. The real ones, where I'm just Min-jae and you're just Emma, and we're 2 people trying to figure out if we're brave enough to choose something better. Emma crossed the small space between them, Lucas still on her hip. She stopped close enough that Min-jae could see gold flecks in her eyes, close enough that he caught her scent. Baby powder and coffee and something uniquely her. This is crazy, she whispered. Completely insane, he agreed. We barely know each other. I know you take your coffee black and sing to Lucas when you think no one's listening, and you scrunch your nose when you're concentrating. I know you're brave enough to steal a baby from criminals and stubborn enough to track my men to my office, and smart enough to see through every lie I've told. That's not the same as really knowing someone. Then let me learn. Let me show up every Tuesday and Thursday. Not as a social worker or a crime boss, just as someone who wants to know everything about you. Let me prove I can be more than what I've been. Emma's free hand came up to his chest, resting over his heart. If you hurt us, I won't. If you bring danger to Lucas, I'll die before I let anyone touch him. Or you. She studied his face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she leaned forward and kissed him. Gentle, tentative, tasting of coffee and possibility. When they pulled apart, Lucas was patting both their faces with chubby hands, delighted by the proximity. "Okay," Emma said. "Let's be crazy together. But Min-jae, you need to actually leave that life. Not reduce your role or step back gradually. Leave. Because I meant what I said about Lucas. I will. I'll need time to transition things. Make sure I don't leave a power vacuum that causes more violence. But I will." Min-jae meant every word. "I'll find something legitimate. Something that doesn't require looking over my shoulder or wondering which former associate might betray me. Do you have any skills besides crime? I'm surprisingly good at spreadsheets." Emma laughed, the sound filling the small apartment with warmth. "Great. My criminal boyfriend's marketable skill is Excel. We're definitely going to make this work." "Boyfriend?" Min-jae's mouth twitched. "Are we 16? Would you prefer a reformed gangster I'm inexplicably dating?" "Boyfriend is fine." Lucas grabbed Min-jae's finger, squeezing with surprising strength. The baby grinned up at him. Pure trust, pure joy, completely unaware that the man holding him had done terrible things. Maybe that was the point. Lucas didn't know the monster. He only knew this version. The man who showed up consistently, who brought formula and smiled at his antics, who looked at his mother like she hung the moon. Maybe that version could become the only version. Maybe redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but building a future different enough that the past lost its power. "So what now?" Emma asked. "Now I go tell my lieutenant that I'm dismantling a criminal empire to open a chain of affordable baby stores." "You're what?" "That was the plan, right? Something legitimate? And I know supply chains, retail operations, customer service from running my other businesses. Why not put that knowledge to good use?" Emma stared at him. "You're serious?" "Completely. Think about it. How many families struggle like you did? Affordable baby supplies, fair prices, maybe subsidized formula for people who need it. Turn the network I've built for crime into something that actually helps people. That's actually brilliant. I have my moments. And incredibly ambitious. Do you have any idea how much work that would take? I built a criminal empire from nothing. How hard can legitimate retail be?" They both started laughing. The kind of helpless, slightly hysterical laughter that comes from tension finally breaking. Lucas joined in with delighted giggles, caught up in the moment. Outside, Seoul hummed with its usual chaos. Somewhere, Min-jae's empire continued operating, oblivious to the fact that its leader had just decided to burn it all down for a woman and a baby who weren't even his. Inside Emma's tiny apartment, 3 people who'd all survived darkness found something rare and precious: the beginning of light. "For the record," Emma said when the laughter faded, "your former gang members are not working at my son's daycare. They'd be very protective." "No. Taesung is great with kids." "Absolutely not." Min-jae grinned. "We'll discuss it later." "There's nothing to discuss." But she was smiling. They both were. For the first time in 20 years, Min-jae Kim had something to lose. And for the first time ever, that didn't terrify him. It felt like coming home. 18 months later, Emma stood in the flagship store of Little Beginnings, Min-jae's chain of affordable baby supply stores that had somehow become Seoul's most successful new retail venture. Lucas, now almost 2, toddled between aisles while his father, because that's what Min-jae was now, legally and in every way that mattered, tried to stop him from reorganizing the diaper display. "He gets that from you," Emma called over. "The need to control everything. He gets that stubborn streak from you." Min-jae shot back, scooping up Lucas before he could pull down an entire shelf. Taesung emerged from the back office, where he now served as operations manager instead of criminal lieutenant. "Boss, I mean Min-jae, we need to discuss the new location in Busan." "The Busan location?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that where your old rivals operated?" "Reformed rivals," Min-jae corrected. 3 of them now work in our distribution center. Turns out they're excellent at logistics." Emma shook her head, still amazed by how he'd managed to transition his entire organization into legitimate business. Not everyone had made the jump. Some had found employment elsewhere. Others had retired on generous severance packages. But the core group had followed their leader into this strange new world of legal commerce and competitive retail pricing. "Your mother called," Emma told him. She's coming for dinner tomorrow. And yes, before you ask, I'm making her favorite. Min-jae's reconciliation with his family was another improbable development in their improbable story. Turned out his mother was thrilled that he'd left criminal life, and even more thrilled about her grandson. I still can't believe this worked, Emma said softly, watching Min-jae play with Lucas. You actually did it. Left everything behind and built something real. Had good motivation. He crossed to her, Lucas balanced on his hip. Besides, this is more profitable than crime ever was. Turns out people really need affordable baby supplies, and they're willing to pay for quality and fair prices. Imagine that. Who knew legitimate business could be so satisfying? Emma kissed him, then Lucas, then Min-jae again. I'm proud of you. Just so you know, I'm proud of us. He pulled her close, the three of them forming a small circle in the middle of the store. We took broken pieces and made something beautiful. That's very poetic for a former crime boss. Reformed crime boss. Retail entrepreneur now. Right. How could I forget? Later, after the store closed and they headed home. To a real apartment now, spacious and bright and free from water damage. Emma reflected on the improbable journey that had brought them here. A mafia boss had watched her return baby formula. He decided to help. She'd tracked him down. They'd fallen in love despite every reason not to. And somehow, impossibly, they'd both found redemption in the wreckage of their pasts. Lucas fell asleep in the car, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Min-jae carried him inside with the practiced care of someone who'd spent 18 months learning to be a father. Did you ever think your life would look like this? Emma asked, watching him tuck Lucas into bed. Never. But I wouldn't change a single thing. He turned to her, pulling her into his arms. Well, maybe I'd skip the part where Tae-sung kept adding caviar to your groceries. That was pretty ridiculous. He's still embarrassed about it. Good. He should be. They stood in Lucas's doorway, watching the baby sleep, and Min-jae thought about the stranger who'd left food at his door when he was 6 years old. The anonymous helper who'd saved his life without ever revealing themselves. He'd spent 20 years trying to become powerful enough that he'd never be that vulnerable again. Turned out the real strength was in being vulnerable enough to accept help, offer help, and build something worth protecting. The formula for love was simpler than he'd expected. Show up consistently, be honest even when it's hard, and choose the people you love over everything else. Everything else was just details. Min-jae, Emma's voice pulled him back to the present. Yes, thank you. For everything. For seeing us that night. For not walking away. For becoming the man I see right now. Thank you for giving me a reason to try. He kissed her forehead. Now come on. I promised Lucas pancakes tomorrow, and I need to look up a recipe. You don't know how to make pancakes? I ran a criminal empire, Emma. Nobody taught me domestic skills. She laughed, the sound he'd never get tired of hearing. Lucky for you, I do know how to make pancakes. Come on, reformed gangster. Let me teach you. They walked to the kitchen together, leaving Lucas to his dreams. Behind them, souls sparkled in the darkness. 10 million stories unfolding, 10 million chances for redemption, 10 million possibilities for people brave enough to choose something better. Min-jae Kim had chosen, and for the first time in his entire life, he was exactly where he belonged. Home.